Are we ready?
Yes.
We can? Okay. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. On November 3rd, 2020, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump clearly and decisively in the presidential election. President Biden won 306 electoral votes to Trump's 232, and he beat Trump in the popular vote by more than 7 million votes. But rather than accept his loss, Donald Trump tried everything he could to overturn the will of American voters. He and his allies filed more than 60 lawsuits with false claims of election fraud and lost all 60 of them. He waged a pressure campaign at every level of government, from county election officials to secretaries of state, to the Department of Justice, to his own vice president, to try to prevent the certification of the election results. At each stage, Donald Trump and his allies were asked to bring forward evidence that the election was tainted by widespread voter fraud. But whether in Michigan or Pennsylvania, or as we will hear today, Arizona, the purveyors of the big lie repeatedly failed to produce one scintilla of credible evidence of widespread fraud. Yet today, more than 11 months after the election, the attacks on our election system have only intensified, and the latest weapon of choice is the partisan audit. Let me be clear, the hyper-partisan audits pushed by President Trump and his allies are not about fairness, election security, or the truth. They are instead designed to promote conspiracy theories and to raise doubts about our elections. And the ultimate aim of these audits is even worse, to lay the groundwork for new laws that make it harder for Americans to cast their ballots, but easier for dishonest officials to overturn the results of elections they don't like. Today's hearing will focus on the 5-month-long hyper-partisan audit in Maricopa County, Arizona. It was clear from the beginning that this so-called audit led by the Republican State Senate was really a fishing expedition in search of evidence of election fraud, no matter how flimsy. The state Senate rejected a bid from a qualified and certified auditor, choosing instead to hire Cyber Ninjas, an unaccredited firm with no experience auditing elections. What the company did have was a CEO who had publicly supported Trump and promoted the so-called big lie. During the audit, Cyber Ninja's sloppy, insecure practices jeopardized the integrity of ballots and voting machines, forcing Arizona taxpayers to spend millions to replace the compromised machines. The audit itself was funded with at least $6.7 million from right-wing dark money groups headed by Trump allies and supporters of Stop the Steal movement. Documents show that Trump himself may have funneled funds to the audit effort in Arizona. Yet all that partisan dark money failed to overcome the truth. Last month, Cyber Ninjas finally was forced to admit that it found no evidence of widespread fraud in the Maricopa County election results. In its final report, Cyber Ninjas wrote that they were, quote, no substantial differences, end quote, between the official count and the audit results, and that there is, quote, no reliable evidence that the paper ballots were altered to any material degree, end quote. This should have been the end of the story, but rather than admit that they were wrong about voter fraud, Cyber Ninjas and Republican leaders in Arizona are now pushing a host of unnecessary legislative changes to make it harder to vote and easier to overturn election results. and hyperpartisan audits are now spreading to more states. We are holding today's hearing so we can hear the facts about the cyber NIGA audits in Arizona. We invited the company's CEO, Doug Logan, to testify today so that we could hear firsthand about the audit's findings. Unfortunately, Mr. Logan refused our invitation, and he also refused to produce documents that the committee requested back in July. Mr. Logan's refusal to answer questions under oath is just one more sign that the dark money-fueled audit he led never should have happened in the first place. Today, we will hear from the chairman and vice chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, both Republicans, who, unlike Mr. Logan, were not afraid to tell the committee the truth about this audit. I am honored that they both agreed to put country over party by testifying today, despite threats to their personal safety. We will also hear from election and democracy experts who will tell us how partisan audits are spreading to other states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Texas, and the threat this poses to our democracy. The attempts by former President Trump and his allies to undermine America's elections are failing to win the last one fair and square. It represents the biggest threat to our constitutional republic since the Civil War. This committee will not be silent in the face of this threat. We will continue to conduct oversight to ensure that the American people know the truth about these sham audits and to protect our elections from further interference. But it should not just be Democrats who stick up for America's elections. I urge my Republican colleagues to follow the lead of our brave witnesses from Maricopa County by putting country over party and finally renouncing Trump's big lie. I want to thank our panelists for being today. Thank you so much for your testimony. And I now recognize the distinguished ranking member